Hi everyone, I hope everybody is well. So happy first part of May, and so this month we have five components, five parts of a two-flower project. So we're going to be making, first of all, in the first three parts, we're going to be making the Magnolia Grandiflora. Now here in the United States, like I live in Atlanta in the south of the United States, this is commonly known as the Southern Magnolia. Because this doesn't really grow up in the northern part of the US. But as I said, so this is known as the Southern Magnolia, a really stunning flower, and it's something that's used a lot, not only just here in the United States, but also in many wedding cakes you'll see. If you did a search on Google and you put in wedding cakes with magnolia, a lot of people do this style of magnolia. I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about different types of magnolia because there are many varieties. But this is going to, as I said, be our start of the Southern Magnolia. And so in this lesson, the first part, we're going to be making the Magnolia center. Then we're going to be moving on to the 9 petals, 6 larger and 3 smaller petals. And then we're going to then continue with the bud. And then in the second part, we're going to obviously make the leaves. And because we have 5 leaves to make, so quite a lot of leaves, large leaves. And then we're going to be moving on to some of the taping and coloring, and also finishing off the stamens on the center. And then the third part, we're going to be moving on to the, obviously all the coloring of the leaves and then putting everything together. And then we'll be moving on to the dogwood. The dogwood is another southern flower, but again, it's become very popular in other parts of the world as well. And now in many countries, they grow dogwood trees. But dogwood is a beautiful spring tree, flowering tree. And we're going to be doing that in 2 parts. So we'll finish off after 5 episodes with stunning magnolia with dogwood, which I'm going to show you also how to put them together in a stunning spray, which you could use in home decor in a vase, or you could use this on a wedding cake as a real showstopper for your wedding. So let's get started. So here we have a Japanese magazine on magnolia variety, but again, you can just do a search on Google or on the internet and just put in magnolia, Southern Magnolia, obviously Japanese style magnolia. Now, obviously magnolias, there are many varieties. This is what we commonly call in the United States, a lot of people call this the tulip tree magnolia because it looks a little bit like tulips. And this actually flowers here in the southern United States. This flowers in sort of February, early March. So actually, like near my home, there's a huge tree which is just covered with thousands of blooms, which is towards the end of its flowering now, obviously in early March. And these grow in, of course, different countries. Like in England, when I grew up in Essex, there was a huge magnolia tree in Chelmsford. I can always remember as a child. This type of tree. But anyway, so this is, as I said, a Japanese style magnolia. The technique of making this is very similar to the magnolia we're going to make. Usually, most of the Japanese style magnolia are two-tone. This means this one, for example, has got white on the inside and then a sort of plummy color on the outside. And when you do that, you would do that the same way we're going to make the leaves, which will be done in the second part of this, obviously, project, where you laminate the paste together with a wire in the middle, like almost a sandwich. Anyway, so this is, as I said, Japanese style magnolia, and you can see here, and just like obviously when we talked about blossoms, the Japanese style magnolia, you can see that when the flowers, there really are no leaves. The leaves are very tiny, they're just starting to come out. And then, of course, at the end of the flowering cycle is when the leaves will come onto the, obviously, tree. Whereas some magnolias, like the one we're going to make, Southern Magnolia, is an evergreen. So your tree never loses its leaves throughout the whole year. So it always has green leaves on it. And the other thing is the Southern Magnolia blooms here in early May. Obviously, Mother's Day is around May 12th in the US and May 12th. So obviously that's, beginning of May. And so that is usually, they're always in bloom when Mother's Day happens here in the US. But so this is the Japanese style magnolia. And then you have here, this is a sort of hybrid. Often we call this the star magnolia here in the US. And that includes varieties like stellatus and some of the other ones. And you can see it's like a really pretty creamy yellow one. But you see, this is, as I said, really almost like a mini version of what we're making. So it's almost between the two. But you can see here, this, like, for example, pink one there. And there's actually some other examples here Magnolia stellatus. So you see this is sometimes called the star magnolia, and you see this has many petals. It almost looks a bit like a cactus flower, like a large cactus flower. So that is, as I said, is the star magnolia or stellatus type of variety. All right, and they're both early flowering. And then we move on to the grandiflora. So this is the southern magnolia. And again, there are, of course, many varieties of this, all right? But classic southern magnolia is the one we're going to be making, which has a sort of creamy yellow center, and then these just off-white petals and the green and brown leaves, all right? So that's, as I said, a little bit about, obviously, magnolias. Here, just to show you, on my iPad here, you can see here, just try and get, so we don't have a reflection, there we go. So we have the magnolia here. And you can see here, this sort of shows the magnolia flower. And this is the bud. We're going to be making the bud in this first episode. Now, the buds are very furry. This is actually from a magnolia tree near my school. So this is a young bud. But you see, it's almost got like velvet on it. All right. So when you stroke it, it feels just almost like velvet, like a little bit like a stroking a bunny rabbit's ears. All right. So it has this really soft hairs on it. And that is what the bud forms into the flower. So just a little bit like when we did like the lotus and certain other things, what happens is the bud, when it's ready to basically form into a flower, the calyx, the pod opens, and then the flower grows from that, and then the calyx basically drops off, all right? So when we do the bud later in this lesson, we're going to almost think of it like two halves, and then it will actually, as I said, when it opens into a flower. But this shows some of the varieties of the, sorry, I have a little bit of reflection on here just from the light. But here we've got the, as I said, the southern magnolia. So this is obviously the southern magnolia here. You can see there with its bud. So of course, when the bud first opens, it would open up to form a sort of half open flower. And then it forms into this stunning flower. All right, and here you can see this shows the bud. Again, this is obviously the bud when the calyx is detached. So unlike, say, the water lily or lotus, where the calyx actually comes off once the flower is in full bloom, as soon as that pod opens, like a pea pod, almost like the calyx just detaches, all right? Now, magnolias, the southern magnolia is the largest it is, I believe, the largest flowering tree there is. It's not unusual for these to be, you know, up to 100 feet tall. And their average lifespan is 80 to 90 years. This is obviously just showing somebody in a magnolia tree. So compared to obviously Japanese magnolia, it's very much like almost like a big oak tree. Here you can see a magnolia in somebody's garden. So literally, as I said, here in Atlanta, for example, in May, all of the magnolia trees are just covered with blossoms. And this is obviously just a few blossoms on here, but sometimes you'd have several hundred in flower at the same time. This actually shows Covington, Georgia, which if you've watched the Netflix Magnolia episode on there called Sweet Magnolias, that was all filmed in, as I said, Covington, Georgia, where Scott is from. And this shows the two magnolia trees. This is the big magnolia tree here. And this one is like over 80 years old. All right, but it shows the size of the piece here. This shows another one of the two magnolias are sort of on the other side of the park. This is in the town square. So that shows the, obviously, magnolias. Now, magnolias are, they, as I said, are very large, all right? Just to give you an idea, this is a 10-inch plate, all right? So this is usually a magnolia can grow up to 12 inches across. So if you think about the flower, all right, that is the size of the flower. So it's basically like a dinner plate size or larger. So the largest ones are about 12 inches across. So several years ago, I was commissioned to make some magnolias for a wedding cake, and they wanted life-size magnolias. So I had some cutters made. So for example, this was the size of the large petal, and this was the size of the smaller petal. Whereas we're going to be doing a sort of a scaled down version, because you can imagine a sort of a magnolia that big is huge. All right, so we're going to be using, this is our larger and this is our smaller petal. All right, but so once you've seen the concept here, you can make this larger or even smaller just based on reducing the pattern. But this made obviously a magnolia which was the size of this dinner plate. Now, of course, on a normal cake, all right, that is going to be too large. Okay, so we're going to be doing a scaled down version. So, but that just gives you a size idea for comparison of how big the magnolia flowers are, okay? So really, as I said, it's like dinner plate size. And then the leaves, all right, these are actually some leaves I picked this morning. These are live magnolia leaves. So again, the magnolia leaf, it has this velvety brown back, all right, and it has this dark green front, okay? So when we do this in lesson 2, we're going to be laminating green and brown together with a wire in between it. And you see the front is very shiny, and obviously the back is this sort of dull, but it has that same velvet sort of texture. It feels almost like suede, all right, like a micro suede or a suede. So they have this brown back onto them. And this is, again, not a full-size leaf because the leaves grow up to 10 inches. So the leaf could be like that size, all right? So basically, as you can see, it's sort of, they're huge, all right? And they're obviously leaves go in various sizes, but just like a lot of trees, you know, when you first plant a magnolia, the leaves are going to be smaller, and then they would just become bigger and bigger. So it's sort of everything is in proportion and scale to the tree. So when you have like a 100-foot, 80-foot, 100-foot magnolia tree, obviously the leaves are going to be up to, as I said, 10 inches in length, okay? But obviously but you can imagine, I mean, that's much bigger than my hand. So, you know, if you think about a normal cake or even using it in home decor, you need a large sort of space. So we're going to do everything a little bit scaled down. And so everything will be proportionate. So we're going to first of all start off with the flower center. So for the magnolia flower center, so following our directions, it says taking a half length 20 gauge and in parentheses 18 gauge for sugar. Now I'm going to do this project in air drying clay, in the hardy clay. And the reason I'm doing that is that when you're using a very large flower, especially on a wedding cake, the advantage of the hardy clay is the weight. Like when you do a big sunflower, like my Flower Pro large sunflower, when you're doing, for example, like this large magnolia, obviously the weight is going to be an issue when you do a sugar one, all right? So sugar one is going to be about 4 times the weight. So you can either work in air drying clay or in sugar. In your obviously checklist, it says to take 5, you need 5 20 gauge half length wires or 5 18 gauge wires for sugar, all right? So I'm going to do air drying clay, so I'm using 20 gauge. Now, so we're only going to use one of these for this first part of the magnolia. In the second part, we will be adding these extra wires to the magnolia stem. Now, some of our members have asked that before, you know, when you're working with air drying clay, do you need to use such a strong wire? And the answer is no, because obviously it's not going to be as heavy. So like, for example, when we make roses, we normally make a rose on a 20 gauge wire. You of course could do that on a sort of a 22 gauge wire for obviously air drying clay if you needed to. But we're going to start off with the wire. We're going to take half width brown floral tape. So I've cut some brown floral tape here. Just going to stretch my tape a little bit. And we're going to go around, create a floral tape bud, going around 10 times, hook the end, and then go around another 15 times. So we're going to do this just like we would when we made like some of the components for the water lily, the lotus, when we make rose cones. So we've used this technique many times. All right, so we just stretch your tape a little bit here, and then going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we're going to then take your pliers here, and fold this over. Just going to squash that like so. And then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And just need to come down about halfway down, okay? Because in the second part of this, we will be adding extra wires. Because the magnolia has a very thick stem, so what we do there is we will be adding 4 extra wires, not really for strength, especially with air drying clay, but more for aesthetics. So it just looks naturally like this. All right, so we've made your floral tape bar. We're just making one of these to go on the flower. Next step is we're going to take a number 10 small of dark cream. Now in your checklist, all right, for the when we make the sugar magnolia, it says there you're going to take a number 13 or a number 13 grams, all right, or a number 12 small going tightly through the hole of flour paste gum paste, and a number 13, number 12 small, number 13 13 grams or a 12 small of sugar paste or rolled fondant. So what we're doing there is you're making 50-50 paste. So 50-50 paste, remember, is half sugar paste or rolled fondant and half flour paste or gum paste. That is if you're doing, if you're going to be doing this in sugar, in traditional flour paste, all right? Then there has no, if you're using the sugar in paste, you can just use it as is because the sugar in paste doesn't dry as quickly, all right? But the reason when we use just regular paste, like for making lily buds, we want to use 50-50 paste so you have a little bit more working time. And then when we do this in air drying clay, what we're doing here is we're going to use 2 number whites and 2 number 7 orange combined on the measuring guide. So we're going to do 2 like formulas of the white and the number 7, and this is going to make this dark cream color. Okay, so this is the air drying clay. So all you need to do here, these look a little bit like fried eggs, you just need to make 2 number 1 whites and then 2 number 7s, which is here, 2 number 7s of orange. Okay, so you're just using white and orange combined together. So what we do there is, so you need two of those, and that will be the exact amount you need for this project. All right, so we're just going to mix this through. You see, this is just going to make this dark cream color. Now I found when we make the bud, especially, remember I showed you it's that sort of greeny brown velvety look. If you start off with a cream color, it's a better foundation than say white. And if we use green, it would almost be too dark. So we use this color, this dark cream color, for both the flower center and also for the bud, which we'll be doing a little bit, as I said, after the petals. All right, and then we're going to take so now we're going to take our size guide and we're going to measure off a number 10 small. So it's going to just take your size guide here. Just going to measure off a number 10 small. So it wants to just go through the hole, just a little bit large. There we go. So number 10 small. You can just pop the rest of your paste back into your bag, and we'll be using this a little later on. And this is, we're just going to use the whole of this piece, which is approximately a number 13 size, okay? So as I said, that just gives you, so we're basically doing 2 recipes of that to use for those 2 components. So then what we're going to do is we're now going to take, we're going to apply some glue, flexi glue, egg white onto the floral tape bud and insert into the ball, mold into a basic cone shape, rotate in medium rose cone cavity, remove and trim off excess paste. So we're going to be using the number 10 small size. So this is number 10 small. So just going to mold this into a balloon, ball shape, a nice smooth ball shape. So we're going to use our rose cone here. I'm going to use some glue, so I'm just using PVA glue. I'm just using this in a little needle tip applicator. Later on, I will also be using some glue with a paintbrush, so whichever you have or prefer. So we're going to take here, just going to put a little bit of glue. So I'm just going to just put a little touch of glue over the top of this. And I'm just going to put this into the ball here. Just mold that around. Remember, when sometimes you use, especially with glue or even with egg white and that, you're going to get like a little, so if you do have a little sticky on the bottom there, just go ahead and use that. Just going to make that into a basic cone shape. And just to get the right shape and size there, we're just going to rotate that. So we take this out of the mold and then we will trim this. So it's going to trim off the excess paste here. Just going to mold that around. And it's going to go back into the mold just a couple of times there just to trim that off, all right? And then once we've done that, we can just put this paste back into our bag. Just pop that back into your little bag there. And then we'll be ready for next step, which is going to be to use the scissors. So you want to use some fine embroidery scissors. I like the sort of spring action style ones, all right? Now, when we're using air drying clay, you know, we've used this technique before. A couple of techniques you can use here. One is to take just like a little bit of vegetable fat, some shortening, and put on your scissors. That will help to cut. The other thing is to use just like a moisturizing cream like Nivea or cold cream as well. That also, as I said, can be used. And you can also use this, like, for example, on the veiners as well, instead of using shortening, because it's a craft project, all right? So what we're going to do here is going to use your scissors. And with our scissors here, we're going to then just start. And I'm going to start sort of just like really almost like where that rim is. And I'm just going to just cut in. So I'm just going to go around there. I'm holding my scissors quite flat. All right, and you see how I'm leaving a little bit of a space between, like that. So you're going to do a ring around, and then we're going to go in between those with another ring. Now all magnolias have this type of center, but like for example on the Japanese magnolia, this is generally done on a green colored paste. So you see how I'm just going around like almost a spiral, but just going to go, so you see how I'm going in between. And then I'm going to do the same here. So this is why if you're doing this in with regular flour paste, gum paste, you use a combination of the flour and gum paste and with the sugar paste and fondant, because you obviously, when you're doing this with sugar, you want this to not dry too quickly. But you see, as you come to the top, these little cuts will of course become closer together because obviously we're coming to the top area here. And you're just going to cut right the way to the top. All right, so you're going to make this spiky center. So then using your finger, what we're going to do here now is we're going to curl these little spurs. So we're actually going to just curl them. So you're just going to stroke these down. So you see how I'm just gently stroking. And if you have any that like are a little flat, all right, you can just open them up with your companion tool. Of course, you could also recut if you needed to as well. But you actually have these like little spurs. You don't have to do those on the top ones. It's just mostly about 3/4 of the way up, 2/3 to 3/4 of the way up. And you're just going to just curl those like that. So you see how you have these little spurs, but you see how they actually sort of curl down towards that, okay? And just going to have these little spurs. And then what we will be doing is we'll be adding some in the second part, like of course, because air drying clay dries pretty quick, but sugar takes a little bit longer to dry. In the second part, we'll be adding some floral tape stamens on the bottom here. And that's how we would make the center. So now we're going to move on to the petals. Now, these are your large and small petals. These are your large and small leaves, all right? So we're going to make two options. You can print this out from the PDF onto cardstock and just cut round those. Or if you want to make a more durable one, where what I've done is I've just used like a plastic placemat. You could use a piece of thick vinyl, acetate, all right? So basically the top of a, like a margarine container, a plastic container, takeout container, to make a more durable one, just like on the ward lily. And so you can, if you're going to do that, you can just obviously just trace that design onto a piece of parchment paper and then just reverse it onto your, I just did that on the back of the placemat here, and then just cut around those. So you have these ready to go. And then you just would keep those in a little bag, both the 2-leaf and the 2-petal templates, and just obviously use a label maker to put their Southern Magnolia. So you've always got those ready to go. So that would be the first step. Then we need to we're going to make the wires. Now we're going to use the technique very similar onto my Flower Pro Lily that I've shown on my videos. And we're going to take the wires. Now in your obviously checklist, we have 3 26-gauge white wires. These will be for the 3 small petals. We have 6 24-gauge third length white wires. And we're doing white because obviously we're going into a very, very pale ivory color. All right, and so we've got these. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to mark on the 3 26-gauge wires 20 millimeters or 3/4 of an inch from one end. So we're going to, and I normally just do this on a piece of paper, so you don't have any chance of marking your table here. Just make these level. I'm just going to use so I'm going to take a pen. So I'm just using a black, obviously, pen here. We will be doing a similar technique on the leaves as well. All right, so I'm just going to use my ruler. It's going to come in, as I said, 2 centimeters or 20 millimeters here. I'm just going to just mark those wires like that. Because when we put this into the petal, we'll go into where the little black mark is, all right? And then we're going to then on the so on the 24 gauge wires, we're going to then mark 25 millimeters or 1 inch from the end. Okay. You can do this on your size guide, but I'm just using here a ruler so I don't get pen on my size guide. So 25 millimeters. So I've just got those like flat, just laid them out flat. I was holding them and I'm just going to go down here. All right, you don't need to do this on one side, but you just got your pen there. If you want to do both sides, you can do. All right, but as I usually just do that on the one side there, like that. So we have our obviously wires are now marked, ready for inserting into there. Remember, I keep these on a magnet, so it just makes it easier to keep them separated. All right, so we've got our wires ready to go here like that. Now the next step we're going to do is going to be relating to our paste. All right, so we're going to be using, so for the sugar ones on your sugar checklist, a number 16 ball of white flour paste, gum paste or flexi paste, colored with a very pale cream ivory color. So just use like an ivory or a cream color. For your air drying clay, so on the air drying clay color, which we need is very pale ivory, we're going to use 25 grams or a number 16 white hardy clay and add a number 4 orange on the size guide. All right, so we're going to use sort of really like a much paler version. We're using the size guide here, not the measuring chart, okay, because now we have both here. So we're going to use your little digital scale. Now we will be in some of the later projects when we come on to like for example the leaves and things as well. Zero this out. We will be talking about using obviously a digital scale, but as I said, this is a high precision one, so this will obviously scale 1/10 of a gram. Okay, so this is where you can be very accurate with this, because remember when you use the measuring mold, the number 1 on the measuring mold is 3.5 grams. Okay. So we're going to go, so here, so you want, you see this will go like 22.1. So we want, as I said, to the 25. I'm just going to bring this around so I can also see 25.1. So this is obviously a very accurate little scale. So it's often just called a micro scale. So this is 25 grams, all right, which is obviously going to give us what we need here. And then we're going to use your size guide. So then we're going to use the size guide there, and we need a number 4 small of orange. But if you're doing this in sugar, you can just use a cream color. And of course, also, if you didn't have orange air drying clay, you could just color this with some cream color. So we're going to take a number 4 small size ball of paste. So we're just going to use, as I said, on the size guide. All right, so that wants to just go through the hole here. And what this is going to do, this is going to make a very pale ivory, because the magnolia petals are off-white. They're not pure white. It's almost just like a slightly off-white color. You can actually see here the color of the petal here. All right, so you can see the color of the petal. It's just a slightly off-white. All right, you can see bright white. So it's just going to be very pale. All right, so if you're using food color, you'll need very little of that. Anyway, so what we do here is just going to mix this through. And then once we've mixed this through, so just going to come through here, but you see it's just going to give us the really pale, but the orange air drying clay works extremely well as a foundation color for, as I said, when you're doing sort of like the creamy colors using that orange. So, you know, if you look like we just did for the, you know, here, you go right the way down to, so we're about like, as I said, but a little bit paler than a number 10. That is why we're not using a measuring chart here, because we want just, and plus also we're using a larger amount of paste as well. And we're going to roll this into a sausage and cut it into 3 sections. All right, so just going to knead this through. You see it's really just an off-white color. All right, you can see I put it against a sort of a white size guide, but you see how it's just a really just slightly off-white, okay? And a lot of times, like in, say, wedding dresses, when somebody says they're having ivory, it just would be that just off-white color. I'm going to roll this into a sausage, okay? And then just going to cut that into 3. sections. Like this, okay? And then once you've got your 3 sections, we will be able to pop this into a little bag. So just going to pop that into a bag here. There's a bag here. Just going to pop this into the bag, 1, 2, 3. And this is going to be ready for the petals. So now we're going to take 1/3 of the paste, all right? So this is 1/3 of our 25 grams or a number 16 size ball of paste, okay? And then what we're going to do here is we're going to use a vinyl folder. Now, in some of my other projects working with air drying clay, because we're going to use this to feed the paste through the pasta machine. So if you haven't watched my sort of fundamentals in air drying clay, which actually was one of the first episodes we ever did, you can watch that. But what I'm going to do here is just going to roll this into a little sausage, okay? And I'm just going to flatten it, and I'm going to put it in a plastic folder, and I'm putting it, this is just part of like a page protector. So I'm going to put it down towards the bottom here. I'm just going to flatten that down. I'm going to cover this over. Now, generally I just use, this is just a PVC pipe, because air drying clay doesn't really take any effort to roll it out. Unlike sugar is a little bit dense. And so we're just going to roll this out, and you want to roll this so that it's going to be a little bit wider than the height of the template, okay? Now we're going to feed this through the pasta machine on number 1 and then on number 2. And if you don't have a pasta machine, what you would do is you just would roll this out until it's big enough to cut out 3 petals, all right? But if you do have a pasta machine, either a hand crank one, this is going to aid in obviously making it correct. So I'm going to come over to my pasta machine. I'm going to show you that process. So now I'm going to, the folded end of the, going to feed that through the pasta machine. Now normally what I do is I put it in and I grab hold of the folder and just pull the folder down. And then I'm going to change to number 2 setting. All right, so now I'm going to go to number 2 setting, and I will then go through. And you notice how the paste is at the bottom of the plastic folder. That's important, because if you put it up here, it's going to squash out the top. So you always put your paste towards the bottom, and then you're going to go through here like so. So that is our paste rolled out. This is going to be big enough for our first 3 petals. So I'm going to open up my plastic folder. I'm just going to put just a little touch of cornstarch on the top, just so it's not sticky. Especially if you're using a cardboard template, it will stick. This is just obviously, as I said, a place and a sort of placemat. So what I'm going to do here is just going to place your petals on, and I'm going to use a cutting wheel. All right, so this is just like a PME cutting wheel. You can also use a mini palette knife. But you want to use something that's not really sharp, because if not, you're going to destroy the plastic, okay? So it's going to cut around your shape. And so you can just position the petals here. Now, when I started in my career 45 years ago, I did a lot of my flowers like this, because there's not going to always be petals you need, and this is a good example. And of course, sometimes, like I'm showing you, you can buy Magnolia cutters. But the other thing is that metal cutters, like with air drying clay, I find they sort of sometimes when you try and cut, you're going to get like fuzzy edges, because it's like a little bit fibrous. So but this is a good alternative to, as I said, if you didn't have obviously the particular cutter you use, you just going to make it. But if you wanted to make something smaller, you see how then what I'm going to do is just going to pull away my excess paste. I'm going to take my, you can use your companion tool for that. I'm going to pull this away. Don't cut them too close to each other. This should be enough, because remember, you're all using exactly the same amount of paste. This is a little thicker at the moment because we need that, and then we're going to be thinning this out. And then just using your, for example, your mini palette knife, just going to almost like use that like a, just to get rid of where you make the cuts. If you have any like little fuzzy edges there, you can also do that with your companion tool as well. You can just run around with your companion tool. You can also use on the bigger ones as well, you can also use the flexi scraper. So you can take your flexi scraper as well, and just gonna go around there like so, okay? So you just keep those in that plastic flap. This excess paste is just gonna go into the bag. Because what we're actually going to do, we've rolled this piece into 3. So the first third is going to be used for the 3 inside petals. Then the larger petals we'll do 2 at a time. So we're going to do 2, 2, and then what you have left from the 3 parts will make the last 2 petals. So now what we're going to do, we're going to then, so we're going to take the, once you cut these out, remove excess pastes, and then smooth the edge with companion tool, flexi scraper, or mini palette knife. And then what we're going to do is going to take 1 petal at a time out of the vinyl folder. We're going to dip brush glue over the wire up until the mark and insert into the base of the petal. Okay, now so we're going to be starting off with the 3. These are our 26 gauge wires. So here I'm going to know, so there's 2 ways to do this. If you're using a needle tip applicator, all right, what you can do there is you can put this wire, because you can get up to a 24 gauge wire into here. But so what I normally do is just make sure the glue is right at the end there. And I just put that in so you see how it's going up to the needle tip. And then what I do is just put a little bit of pressure. So I'm just putting a little tiny bit of glue onto there. Alternatively, as I will show you on the next one, you can also brush this on. And on some of the projects, like for the leaves where we've got longer versions of this, we will use the brush. So we're going to take your, remember you can use your, here, just try not to distort this too much. All right, and you can use just a little bit of flower cornstarch on your finger. So you can just take your, like we would do say on rose leaves, you can just thread that wire into the petal. You just put it in till the black part just disappears, and then you're just going to just pinch that at the bottom. So really what you're doing there is just molding it down to make like a V shape, okay? Just as I said, if you need to do any dealing with that. And then once we've done that, we're going to place in the Flower Pro Stay Fresh folder and repeat on another 2 petals. So then I'm using my Flower Pro Stay Fresh folder. So I'm just going to just take this, just going to position this, and I'm going to position it like right the way in so that the wire is obviously covered with the, and then you will do the second one. I'm just going to show you 2 of these ones just so you've got the idea. Now remember, you can also, when you're doing this, you can, other ways to do, put the wire in. You can also, of course, just lift that up. So remember, you can also use your pad, like we've discussed before. So you take your wire here, and I said, so I'll show you this one. So then the alternative, if you don't have a needle tip applicator, would be just to use a little bit of glue. Okay, I'm just going to just brush a little bit of glue onto the wire. And then what I have here, just so the glue doesn't dry, I've got here just a little plastic bag with a wet wipe, sort of just a, you know, and just going to put that into there like so. And then just, so this is how I normally, when I teach air drying clay, I just keep my, whereas like with a, obviously when we do this in sugar, we generally use a washcloth or a flannel. Just keep that covered. So remember, the alternative method you can also use is you can put this right on the edge of your little mini pad here, and then you can just feed the, just feel that tickle your finger as that goes into there like so. Just going to mold that around the bottom. Okay, and you position that. Now of course you would do all 3 of these. I'm just going to show you 2. All right, now when we dry these, all right, we're going to dry these ones are going to be dried into a spoon. All right, so we're going to, very much like we did on the lotus. So if you have 3 tablespoons, just use those. And then if you don't have 3 tablespoons, you can take your foil former. So you can just take a piece of foil like this and just going to go over the top of the spoon back 3 times. All right, so this is going to sort of emulate the same shape as the spoon. All right, so as I said, you can just use 3 spoons, or obviously you can use, as I said, the foil over the back of the spoon. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take your, here. So next step, but I found generally with rolling pins, you know, when we do sugar, we use a more of a heavy duty, but the PVC pipe works great. It's very lightweight. As I said, you don't really need a lot of pressure on there. And so then what we would do is, of course, you'd have 3 of these under here. So now we're going to then, so we repeat with the other 2 petals. You're going to thin around the top 2/3 of each petal. So you're going to take your thumb or your finger, and I'm going to thin the top 2/3. So very much like we do when we do, like, for example, a calla lily. So I'm just going to go around your edge of the the top 2/3 here. So what this is going to do is going to make this just slightly bigger, but it's also going to thin out your edge of your petal here. All right, so you do that on your three petals. Now, next step is going to be to prep my veiner. Now, there are two options, all right? I'm going to use the peony, okay? So this is the peony and the peony back veiner. We're just using the peony back veiner, all right? And alternatively, you can also use the calla lily, okay? And especially if you were ever going to do a large magnolia, because this is limited to the size you could make. Like this is basically the largest size. I made this to fit the peony veiner, okay? But if you were making, for example, like a very large magnolia, you could use this as your veiner. Now what we're going to do is going to put some plastic wrap onto here. So it's going to take a little bit of the cling film plastic wrap. And I'm going to take this. Now the reason we're doing this is what this is going to do is going to stop it making it too heavy a veining, because when we actually, when you vein magnolias, magnolias don't have a lot of veining on them. And in fact, a lot of the ones you will see on the internet, people actually don't use any veining, all right? But I like that sort of veining. So you would either take, so just using some plastic wrap, you just will take that and you put that on the top of the calla lily, or as I said, you would put it onto the here onto the peony back veiner. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to fold that around. So what the plastic wrap is doing here is acting as a buffer. All right, so you're just going to just press this on the top there like that. So what it means is when you press the petal on there, you will get veining, but it's going to be a lot more subtle. So when we do this, all right, we're going to be doing this. So the base of the petal will be at the V shape, all right, like where our wire would go in. And when you do the calla lily, but on the calla lily, you use the calla lily upside down. So what you're actually doing is when you do the petal on the calla lily, you see how then again you will get that sort of fan shape, you see? So if you were making a larger petal with this technique, this is the way you would do it. So what we do there is you're going to take your petal, all right? So you're going to take your petal one at a time here. I'm just going to carefully take this out of the plastic. Remember, you've got 3 of these in here. So just gently pull that off. Don't sort of pull it too hard, all right? And you can put a little bit, if your paste feels a bit, you know, your air drying clay is a bit wet. I mean, this is quite fresh. Just put a little bit of cornstarch onto there. Now, what we're going to do, this is the underneath, the back of the petal, all right? This was the, when we softened it, this was the one that was on the flaps. So this will be ultimately the front. So you place this onto here, like so. So it goes where that V shape is. I'm just going to put a little touch of cornstarch on there. Taking my cosmetic sponge, I'm just going to just gently press, and I'm not going to press around where the wire is. All right, so I'm just going to leave this area here really like unveined, basically. All right, you're going to take that off. You're going to turn it over. Now when someone's going to see the tip of the wire a little bit, and don't worry about that, because once it dries, plus this is also the back, and when we dust the color on there, you're not going to notice that. All right, and then again, we're just going to press this on to here. But remember, if your paste is a little bit soft, a little sticky, you can just use your little bit of corn flour. So you see it actually will then sort of stick to the plastic. All right, so we've now veined the front, okay? So the next step is we're going to then wrap over the peony veiner and then remove the petal, and then, so remember, we're going to place the back side down on the cling film, so the petal is at the V shape, and then you're going to turn it up the other way round, and then press over with cosmetic sponge. Do not press where the wire is. Turn over, repeat on the other side, and then we're going to soften the top 1/3 of the petal using a shaft of your companion tool on your finger. So when we're doing air drying clay, now if you have sticky fingers, all right, this is where you can also take just like a little bit of like Nivea cream or cold cream or a little bit of vegetable, and just going to put just a little bit of that onto your finger, okay? So this is we're going to soften like we would with a bottle on the back. Now this is again just showing you another technique of softening, and that is, so you're going to just use your, you see, you're just going to use your finger and just going to just gently go around with your companion tool just to get a very, very slight softening. So you see how you're just going to be showing you this again, all right, very, very slight softening. So that is done on the back side, all right? And then on the front side, you're going to just hollow this. So you're just going to hollow it around the shaft of your companion tool. All right, and then you would take your spoon here. Now, if you over frill, for example, there, like if you do over frill, you can just flatten it out and you can just give it a quick trim with a pair of scissors, all right? But just some of you have experienced issues with trying to soften with the companion tool. So using the back of your finger, as I said, your finger here, like that, just very, very gently, just sort of roll in one direction. That will give you that softening. And then all you do is you place this into your spoon. Now, we don't bend these wires like we did on the water lily and the lotus because we don't need so much shape there. And then you can just, on these inside ones, you can just get the edge of the petal just to come just in just a little tiny bit. So a little bit like how we do roses on the back of the rose petal. You can just have that curling in like that, okay? And then you would just put those to one side. All right, and I'm just going to show you the next one again, and then I'll show you how we do the large ones, okay? But as I said, this is fresh paste, so if it does feel a bit sort of like you feel it feels a bit sticky, you can just leave it out for a second. And again, when you thin, if you have any like little imperfections there, you can just give that a little bit of a trim. Remember, don't make it too thin on the edge because magnolias are quite thick petals, okay? So again, we're just going to place this onto the veinner. Now, if you were using the calla lily, just to show you, because the veining is quite similar. I mean, the peony is a little bit finer, but if you were doing the calla lily, see how you place it here like that? So you're going to press this on. So that's done on that will be the back, and then you turn it to the front. Just going to press this on to give you the front of the petal. All right, and then this technique of softening, you're just going to use your, so this is just going to see how I'm using my finger here, and just going to just gently just roll using the shaft, and that is going to give you that just a nice natural look on the edge. But remember, it's not a real frilly flower, okay? And you turn it over to the front side, and you're just going to just hollow around the companion tool. And then this would go into your spoon, all right? So you'd have, remember, you just pop it in the spoon, and then you're just going to use just bring your fingers around like that. So you almost like you see how that part of the petal is just curled up just very slightly. And then you're just going to continue, and so you'd make the second. So these are three, obviously, dry ones here. 1, 2, 3, like that. And that will be your inside petals of your magnolia. And and then of course in your instructions, if you were doing these in sugar, so if this was a gum paste, a flower paste one, you just on the back of that, you just would take your balling tool and you soften. Remember, you can't do this technique that we do in sugar with the air drying clay because it's more clammy and a little bit wet. It's just going to tear the petal, all right? But you can use, like for example, a metal balling tool, all right? You can buy metal balling tools, and then with a metal one, you can roll along the edge, but you actually let the ball almost like roll onto there. But as I said, the technique of using your finger, remember, is that it's just going to use just on the edge of your finger like that. Just going to just gently roll that just to give you that nice subtle softening on your edge of your petal. And that is how we would do the magnolia petals. So now we're going to move on to the large petals. So this time we're using a large serving spoon. And if you did the project, the water lily and lotus, remember you've got your formers kept as I suggested, so we're using the same size. But again, you just will use, and generally on a foil sheet like this, you can get 3 of these on the sheet. We're going to then just going to go over the back of a large serving spoon 3 times, okay? Because most of you probably wouldn't have 6 large serving spoons. But the other thing is, you know, like for example, a dollar store, this actually came from a dollar store, pound store. So, you know, that's another thing, just invest in those and you can just use them and just put the petal straight into there. But we've got our formers ready. And so what we're going to now do is going to repeat the process. So repeat as for the small petals. Remember, we're using 24 gauge wire. And then with the large petals, roll in another section, cut 2 large petals. So how I do this, all right, is so now you would take another 1/3 of your paste. And then because this is you know, like a little taller, what I do is I actually roll this to the width of the large petals rather than to the height of the small petals. So again, what I'm going to do here is going to place this into my vinyl folder. So remember, this is just like a page protector. And just going to place this on the top. Just going to press that down. Okay, we're going to take our rolling pin here. Just going to roll this out. So what we're doing here is, you see, so now we're making it this the width, all right? Because then when we go through, we'll have enough to cut 2 of these out. So now I'm going to go through my pasta machine on, as I said, number 1 and then number 2. And when I come back, I'm going to show you how to cut these out. So now I've got this rolled out. So you can see this is going to be enough to cut 2. You just have to move them around so they sort of fit into the space. But remember here, you're worrying about the width. Remember on the first ones, we made them a little bit higher than the length. And in these, we do 2 at a time, okay? So what we're then going to do is, again, just going to take this, just going to put a little bit of, especially as I said, if you've got a cardboard template, but we're going to then take the pattern, okay, and then with your pattern here, so the plastic cutting wheel doesn't damage the plastic folder. But an alternative is you can also use like a little small mini palette knife. I use these a lot for different projects. And then of course, then you can just take the next one. So whichever way is going to be easy to cut that out, and you cut out your next one. I'm just going to show you one of these because you've obviously seen the technique. All right, I'm just going to pull away your excess paste. Going to pop this back in your bag. Again, just going to go around your edge here, just to get rid of that. And then here we're going to use the, as I said, we're going to be using the 24 gauge wire. So remember, this is obviously going to go in a little further. Again, you can use your, you know, and then another way you can do it, because this is a little bit thick, 24 gauge wire is a bit thick to go into there. So you can also just gonna take just a little bit of glue onto there. You just rub over your finger. All right, so you can use a brush or, as I said, insert. But the smaller wires like the 30, 28, 26, you can insert it into the needle tip applicator. And of course, you can also buy larger glue bottles as well, which will be another alternative. So again, you're just gonna peel that off gently off of here. All right, remember if it's a bit wet feeling, a little bit sticky, you can just use your, and remember, either use your thumb and your finger to insert the wire. But this technique of using the marking on there with a pen is very useful because it sort of means that all the wires go in exactly the right amount of into the wire. Now in sugar especially, like, you know, like when you have sugar, but what will happen is it looks a little bit translucent here because when you make the wire wet with glue or with egg white, what's going to happen is almost the paper becomes translucent, but when that actually dries, it's going to become opaque. But so that's sort of, you know, quite normal, as long as the wire is not physically sticking out, but you will see the shadow of the wire. That's quite normal in your, as I said, with sugar or with your air drying clay. And then remember, you're going to pop these into your, here, and then you will continue with the second and the second one. All right, so remember 2 at a time. And using your thumb or your finger, going to go around, as I said, the top 2/3 of this. Not too much pressure. That's why we're not using a balling tool, but we're just thinning around the top 2/3 of the petal, like that. Okay, but you do both of them at the same time. And then again, you're going to use your, because if we didn't have the plastic on here, the cling film or plastic wrap, what would happen is almost like the veining is going to be a little bit too heavy. So that's a really good little tip there. And we've used that technique as well for certain other projects where we've used paper in there and things like that. So again, just going to line it up, and you see that's the sort of maximum. So when I made these patterns, I've scaled everything to fit in with your flower bro. But remember, if you were ever doing a larger version of the Magnolia or another flower in this concept, you just would use, as I said, the calorie veiner, but upside down. Just going to take this, and then we're going to do the other side of that. So if you put a little bit of cornstarch on there, what that does, it stops. Now, of course, just like whenever we do double-sided veining, when you're doing this on a traditional method of making flowers where you're doing one side and the other side, you're going to lose the veining a little bit on the back. Remember, this is the back of the petal. All right, and then you're going to take your, and then here, this is where we were going to use your, so you see I'm just literally just using my finger there just to work my petal over. Now the other thing is when you do the hollowing out, all right, don't sort of like do it like that because your wire will poke out. So the other thing you can also do is you can place it onto a pad, all right? You can bring it off the edge of the pad like that, and you can hold the stick there and you can just pinch around the bottom, all right? So that's also another, if you found that easier. And then you just would basically put these into your petals like this, and you see again they would just dry in here like this. Now when we do that, we're going to be, you don't curl those petals back, you're just going to continue with your 3 petals, and then you'll have another 3. So we have actually a total of 6 of these petals, all right? So we have 6 of these larger petals and 3 of the smaller petals. Those will be our components, all right, ready for basically for the next part when we're going to put these together and color them. So we have those done, and then so you of course would do 2, and then then you take the third part of the paste, you roll that out and cut another 2, and then all the paste that's left combined together for the last 2. All right, and that will now enable you to make the 3 small petals and the 6 large petals. So now we're moving on to the bud. Now on your checklist for air drying clay, we have 5 full length 20 gauge wires. And then for sugar, we have 5 full length 18 gauge wires, because of course, as I explained in the beginning, the air drying clay is a lot lighter, whereas a sugar bud is going to be a lot heavier. Now we're again, just like on the flower center, we're just going to use one of these wires in this first part. And then we will be in the second and third part, we'll be using the other 4 wires to add to make that natural stem. Now here in your instructions, so take a full length 20 gauge, 18 gauge for sugar, green or white wire, remember it doesn't matter here. It's important that you use white wire for the petals, but the other things can be green or white. Using half width brown floral tape, take from the top of the wire down 25 millimeters or 1 inch. So what we're going to do here is going to just stretch your tape a little bit. So we're just going to start at the top of the wire, and we're just going to come down approximately about 25 millimeters, all right? So about 25 millimeters, about 1 inch. And then what we're going to do is then we're going to then tape up. So that's 2, down 3, up 4, down 5, up 6, down 7, up 8, down 9, up 10, and down 11. So we've done 11 times. So you see how you're going to get this like sausage shape on the end of this rather than a hook or a traditional floral tape bud. And then we're going to then continue halfway down the wire. So now we're going to just continue about halfway down the wire. All right. So once we've done that, we're going to take in the leftover paste, which would be about a number 13 size. You don't need to measure this, especially if you're using the air drying clay, but in your sugar as well. So you just take the paste that is left here. Mylar bags are a little bit crunchy sounding. Okay, so we're just going to take the paste here, and then we're going to mold this into a carrot shape, all right, which wants to be about 55 to 60 millimeters long, all right? So just so roll that into a ball. Now remember, when you make a ball, you're going to cup both your hands, all right? So like when you make, say, like marzipan fruits or figure modelings, you actually cup both your hands like this. And see, then you can actually make that into a nice ball. And then we're going to roll this into a cone shape, or carrot shape, I should say. You can also use your flexi scraper will help to do this as well. So you see how you're going to use your flexi scraper. You can use it long ways or short way like this. All right, but you see how it's going to create that nice shape. Or you can use your hand where you're actually holding your hand like in an angle like this. So you see how, so you can either use your hand, or as I said, you can use your flexi scraper. But this wants to be, as I said, about 55 to 60 millimeters long. All right, made that a little bit long. There we go. So between 55 and 60 millimeters, it's going to make your bud shape. Okay, so now we're going to take some glue. In the case of the air drying clay, just going to brush some glue. Remember, air drying clay sticks to itself, as you will see when we move into the next part, when we do the leaves and laminate the green and brown. But usually when I'm making flower centers or petals, I always prefer just as like a little extra security, just to make sure I've got a little bit of glue on there. All right, so you're going to put a little bit of glue onto there. Then we're going to just insert that into your paste there until that just disappears. Just going to mold that around the bottom. Now again, with sugar, when you're using regular sugar, remember this is 50-50 paste. So you can use that. And then once we've done there, we're going to use the companion tool to mark a line each side. And with the air drying clay, we're going to be using a little bit of water in a minute here. Now again, when you're doing this, all right, what I'm going to do is going to take my companion tool. And with my companion tool, I'm just going to mark one side. And I'm going to mark the other side here. All right. And again, you can take your, you can use a little bit of Crisco. You can use some cream on there as well, because sometimes with air drying clay, it will sort of drag. So again, what you're going to do here, you're just going to go down just sort of lightly with your down to the bottom here, like that. It's going to make a line. And then directly opposite, we're going to have another line. So you're dividing this into two. This is going to be like the bud I showed you right in the beginning there, like so. And then what we're going to do is then use the shaft of the companion tool to mark deeper lines. And on air drying clay, dip in water. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take a container with some water. I'm going to put my companion tool into here. And so I've got a wet companion tool. So just think about like when a potter works with clay, they're using wet hands. So if you actually take, then you see like a wet, you see how then when you do that, you're going to get this nice deep sort of cut, because this, what we're making here is actually the calyx of the bud. See how I'm just going to work down with the water. So you're almost just using like a wet, just like in clay where you use your wet fingers. You see how you're going to get then that nice, you're not going to get that sort of imperfections. And you can just take a little water on your finger, and then like for example on the edges here, if you get any little, and just also around the bottom, just going to use a wet finger here, just going to smooth this with your little tool here. All right, and you can also, you can use the, like the veining tool as well. You can use that just to sort of get into there, or your companion tool, because it's going to dry. Just make sure that comes right the way to the end there. So you'll have a nice dividing line there and on the other side. Okay, and so those will be our so this is a nice thing about the air drying clay, that you can just basically take your wet finger. But as I said, also like the cold cream or Nivea cream or that, you can use that as well as an alternative to vegetable shortening as well. Okay, so here we have your bud. And so now in your directions here, it says there, so when making sugar, hang upside down to dry, because if you stand this up, because the center part only goes about 2.5 centimeters, which is only, you know, like half of the length of this is where, so if you make this and stand it up in sugar, the top could droop over. So you just would hang this on a, you know, drying rack, or hang it upside down like this. So it will just dry upside down. On the air drying clay, there's no need. This is quite a long wire. So what a lot of times I will do, like in classes and things, so it's not so stable on the table, but just obviously bend your wire like this, and then you just will put this into your styrofoam block or your cake dummy, whatever you're going to leave this in to dry. And here you have your center. So this is the center and the bud, which are done in a dark cream. So these are going to be ready for the second part, where we're going to be working on the stamens on the center. And then we'll actually won't come back to the bud until the third part, when we do the coloring on the leaves and the petals and things. So as you can see, here are your components that we will make in this first part of the Southern Magnolia. So we've made our Magnolia center and we've made our Magnolia bud. Remember, these are done in a dark cream color, so just following your checklist. If you're doing sugar, remember, half sugar paste rolled fondant and half flour paste gum paste, so it's not going to dry too quickly. And also remember, these don't serve any support, meaning that when you make flower centers like this, because the center will be independent of the petals, whereas when we make things like rose cones, it's important that you use just straight flower paste gum paste, because obviously your cone is like your foundation of a house. But when we make independent things like lily buds, so when you watch my lily video, or that is in obviously book 2, we use again the same, sort of half sugar paste, half rolled fondant. Alternatively, you can also modify sugar paste by adding tylose, which we've done in some of the projects, like on the bamboo as well, and just make that in a cream color. And then we have our 3 smaller petals, and we have our 6 larger petals. These are going to just be kept somewhere safe for the next part, where we're going to be working on the stamens. We're going to be working on the leaves, and also then, of course, doing some of the taping and finishing off. So I hope you've enjoyed this first part of the Southern Magnolia. We'll have a lot of fun making some of these new, obviously, things we've learned, some of the different techniques, trying those out. So whether you're working in air drying, clay, or sugar, have fun. Until next time, sweet wishes. See you soon. Bye.